The hot sun was shining brightly in the sky, making everything feel super warm. The road looked wavy because of the heat, and the neighborhood was quiet. Two men were jogging down the empty street. Their names were Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham. They were famous actors, but today they were just two guys out for a run. They had finished their movies and wanted to keep training, so they decided to jog through a peaceful part of town. As they ran, Jason wiped the sweat off his forehead. "I need something cold to drink," he said, looking at Keanu. Keanu just smiled a little, like he already had an idea. Then, up ahead, they saw something interesting, a small lemonade stand. It was in someone's front yard with a bright yellow sign that said, "Fresh lemonade $1." A young black girl, around 11 or 12 years old, stood behind the stand. She was wearing a simple red t-shirt and looked very focused as she cleaned the counter and lined up the cups perfectly. Keanu slowed down and nodded toward the stand. "How about we take a break?" he asked Jason. Jason chuckled and agreed. "Yeah, let's see if this lemonade is as good as it looks." As they walked up to the stand, the girl's eyes lit up. She looked excited to have customers. "Hey there, want some fresh lemonade? Ice cold?" she said happily. Keanu leaned on the stand a little, a small smile on his face. "That depends," he said, crossing his arms. "Is it any good?" The girl stood up straight and put her hands on her hips. "Best lemonade in town. Guaranteed," she said with confidence. Jason raised an eyebrow, impressed by her attitude. "All right, you convinced us. We'll take 2 cups." The girl nodded and carefully poured 2 cups of lemonade from the big pitcher. She handed them over like a pro, making sure not to spill. Keanu took a sip. The cold drink felt amazing after running in the hot sun. He let out a satisfied sigh. Jason also took a sip and nodded. "This is good," he said. "All right," Jason said, setting his cup down. "How much do we owe you?" $1 per cup, so $2 total, the girl said proudly. Jason took out 2 crisp dollar bills and handed them to her. But he looked curious. "It's summer. Shouldn't you be out playing with your friends instead of selling lemonade?" he asked. The girl's smile softened. She shrugged a little. "I'm saving up for college." Keanu raised an eyebrow, surprised. "College? That's a big goal for someone your age." She nodded firmly. "Yeah. My mom works 2 jobs to take care of us, and I don't want her to struggle forever. If I start saving now, by the time I finish high school, I'll have a good amount saved up. I don't want to depend on loans or hope for a miracle. I want to earn it myself." Keanu and Jason looked at each other. They didn't need to say anything, they both understood. This girl was special. She was determined and hardworking. Jason took another sip of his lemonade and looked at the stand thoughtfully. "Well, this lemonade alone proves you've got a strong work ethic." Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He peeled off 10 crisp $100 bills and placed them gently on the counter. The girl's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Jason smiled. "You deserve this. It's not a gift, it's an investment in your future." She stared at the money, shaking her head. I can't take this. It's too much." Keanu leaned in slightly. His voice was warm but firm. "Listen, you already have the kind of drive and determination that most people only develop later in life. You've earned this by working hard and setting your goals early. We're just giving you a little boost." Tears welled up in the girl's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She looked between the two men, her voice shaking. "Thank you. This is going to change everything for my family." Jason patted her shoulder gently. "Just promise us one thing." She looked up at them, still overwhelmed. "What?" Keanu smiled. "One day when you've made it, find someone else who needs help and do the same for them." The girl nodded quickly, understanding the weight of their words. "I promise." Jason finished his lemonade in one big gulp. "Well, that's the best drink I've had in a long time." Keanu nodded. "Definitely worth the stop." As they jogged away, the girl clutched the money to her chest, her heart racing. She had started this lemonade stand with a small dream, but now, thanks to 2 unexpected customers, her future seemed much brighter. But just as Keanu and Jason ran further down the street, a deep, distant rumble echoed in the air. The sound felt strange, like a warning. The girl was still holding the money, her fingers trembling as she tried to process what had just happened. She glanced around, almost expecting someone to wake her up from a dream. But the money was real. The promise she had made was real. She took a deep breath and exhaled, trying to stay calm. She carefully tucked the money under a wooden crate beneath the stand, hoping it would be safe there. Then she straightened up, fixed her sign, and got ready to keep selling lemonade. But something had changed. The peaceful sound of the neighborhood, the lawnmowers, the birds, the cars passing by, was gone. Instead, there was only that deep, low rumble. It made her stomach twist. She turned toward the street, her heartbeat quickening. The rumbling got louder, shaking the ground. Then they appeared. 6 motorcycles turned the corner, rolling down the street like a pack of wolves. Their shiny metal gleamed under the sun. The men riding them were big and tough-looking, dressed in worn-out leather jackets. Their arms were covered in faded tattoos. None of them wore helmets, showing their rough faces with thick beards and piercing eyes that seemed to be searching for something. The girl swallowed hard but stood still as the bikers approached. At first, they just rolled past her stand, looking at it like they were hunting for something. But then, just as they reached the end of the block, the leader, a bald man with a thick beard and a long scar across his cheek, lifted his hand. Instantly, the entire group slowed down, turned around, and came back toward the lemonade stand. They stopped and turned off their engines. The sudden silence felt heavy. The leader swung his leg over his bike and stepped onto the pavement. He cracked his neck and stretched his shoulders before walking up to the stand. The girl gripped the counter tightly, her nails digging into the wood. Well, the leader said in a rough voice. What do we have here? A little lemonade business. The girl cleared her throat, forcing herself to sound brave. Yes, sir. $1 per cup. Want some? One of the bikers, a stocky man with a greasy ponytail, snorted. $1 for sugar water? That's a scam. The other bikers laughed. The girl stood her ground. That's the price. You drink, you pay. Some of the bikers exchanged looks, surprised by her courage. The leader smirked and took a step closer, resting his large hands on the counter. And what if we don't feel like paying? He said slowly. One of the other men, a tall guy with a missing front tooth, reached for a cup and poured himself some lemonade. He took a sip, then made a face. Tastes like garbage. Then, without warning, he dumped the lemonade onto the ground. The other bikers laughed loudly. The girl clenched her fists. You owe me $1, she said through gritted teeth. The leader smirked wider. Oh yeah? And what if I don't pay? You gonna call the cops? Another biker took a cup, drank from it, then tossed the empty cup onto the ground. I've had better. That's $2, the girl said, her voice steady. The bald leader laughed, shaking his head. You got guts, kid, I'll give you that. Then he looked past her toward the back of the stand. His smirk twisted into something darker. But, what do we have here? She turned to follow his gaze, and there it was, a big stack of money, $11,000 in crisp bills, sitting behind the counter. She had tried to hide it under a wooden crate, but now, under the sharp eyes of these men, it stood out like a bright light. The biker with a scruffy beard let out a low whistle. Wow, kid. You making a fortune selling lemonade? Another biker leaned in, narrowing his eyes. Or maybe you took this from your mom's purse? I didn't steal anything, she snapped, stepping in front of the money to protect it. The bald leader of the bikers took a slow step forward, his face hard to read. Relax, he said in a smooth but mocking voice. We're just curious. A little girl like you shouldn't have this much money. Someone might get the wrong idea. Her hands clenched into fists. That's my money. I earned it. Oh yeah. The leader tilted his head. How? She lifted her chin proudly. 2 men bought lemonade and gave me a big tip. The bikers looked at each other and then burst into laughter. What? One of them laughed loudly. Some random guys just gave you 10 grand for lemonade? You really think we'll believe that? I don't care what you believe, she shot back. The leader's smirk faded. He took another step closer, his shadow falling over her. Tell you what, he said in a quiet, sneaky voice. Since you're doing so well, we'll help you out. We'll take this money and make sure it's spent the right way. He reached for the stack of money, but she moved fast. She slammed her hands down onto the bills, gripping them tightly. No. The leader's eyes darkened. You don't want to do that, kid. Her heart pounded, but she didn't move. Get your hands off my money, she said, her voice strong and steady. For a moment, everything was quiet. The leader stared at her, his jaw tightening. Then he let out a short laugh. Brave, he muttered. Stupid but brave. One of the bikers, looking eager for a fight, stepped closer. Maybe we should teach her a little lesson. The girl braced herself, her mind racing for a way to escape. And then a shadow fell over the lemonade stand. A deep, powerful voice cut through the tension like a knife. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The bikers froze. The girl turned her head, her breath catching in her throat. Behind the bikers stood 2 men. They were tall and strong, their presence filling the space with quiet power. It was Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham. Their eyes locked onto the bikers, their expressions unreadable but full of hidden energy, like lions waiting to pounce. The bikers turned, sizing up the two men who had suddenly appeared. The bald leader smirked, but there was doubt in his eyes now. Well, he said, crossing his arms. Look what we have here. Jason cracked his neck, then his knuckles. Yeah, he said smoothly. Look what we have here. Keanu's gaze flickered to the stack of money, then back to the bikers. His voice was calm, almost amused. I don't think that cash belongs to you. The air grew thick with tension. The girl still held onto her money, taking a shaky breath. She wasn't alone anymore. And the real fight was about to begin. The 6 bikers shifted their full attention to Keanu and Jason. The 2 men didn't move, their confidence so strong it made the bikers uneasy. The bikers were used to being the scary ones, but now the tables had turned. The silence stretched, pressing down on the group. The bald leader turned slowly, eyeing Keanu and Jason carefully. He still looked cocky, but deep inside he wasn't so sure anymore. Let me guess, the leader said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You 2 are the ones who gave the kid all this cash? Jason's eyes narrowed. That's right. The leader chuckled, shaking his head like this was some big joke. And you think that means we'll just walk away? Keanu's lips barely twitched. That would be the smart thing to do. The leader tilted his head, looking amused. See, the way I see it, we found a little girl sitting on a pile of cash all alone. Then a couple of actors show up, thinking they can scare us off. He waved a hand lazily. You're in our way. Jason's fingers flexed slightly, his face still unreadable. And you're in ours. One of the bikers, a big guy with a thick beard, laughed. You 2 really think you can take all of us? Keanu let out a quiet breath. I think you should learn to count. The bikers frowned, confused. Before they could figure it out, the leader lunged. The moment the first punch was thrown, the fight exploded. Keanu moved smoothly, catching the biker's wrist midair. With a sharp twist, he sent the man stumbling forward and then slammed a palm into his chest, knocking him backward. Jason was just as fast. He dodged another biker's punch and drove his elbow into the man's ribs. The biker gasped in pain as Jason grabbed his jacket, yanked him forward, and kneed him hard in the stomach. The biker collapsed, groaning. Another biker charged at Keanu, swinging wildly. Keanu leaned back just enough to let the punch miss, then hooked the man's arm and spun him around, slamming him face first against the wooden lemonade stand. The stand rattled from the impact. Jason ducked under another attack, then drove his fist into a biker's side. The man stumbled. Jason grabbed the front of his leather vest and flipped him over his shoulder, sending him crashing onto the pavement. A wiry biker with a snake tattoo pulled out a switchblade, flipping it open with a sharp click. Keanu's eyes flickered to the knife. His muscles tensed, ready. The biker lunged, but Keanu was faster. His hand shot out, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted the blade right out of his grip. The knife clattered to the ground. Before the biker could react, Keanu struck him in the chest with his palm, knocking him off balance. Jason was already handling another attacker. A huge biker swung a metal chain at him. Jason dodged, caught the chain midair, and yanked it forward. The biker stumbled, and Jason used the momentum to punch him hard in the jaw. The man crumpled to the ground, groaning. The leader of the bikers clenched his teeth in frustration. He looked at his crew now lying on the ground, groaning in pain. His face turned red with anger. Then, with a growl, he lunged at Keanu. Keanu didn't even flinch. He sidestepped, grabbed the leader's jacket, and used his own strength against him. The leader went flying and landed hard on the pavement. The remaining bikers hesitated, their confidence now shattered. Jason rolled his shoulders and looked at the one still standing. Anyone else? No one moved. The leader pushed himself up, breathing hard. His pride was wounded, his gang defeated. He glanced at his crew, then at Keanu and Jason. His jaw clenched. This ain't over, he spat. Keanu tilted his head slightly. Yeah, he said. It is. The leader wanted to argue, but he knew he had lost. With a sharp breath, he gestured to his crew. Get on your bikes. The bikers didn't wait. They scrambled up, some limping, others holding their sides. Their motorcycles roared to life. One by one they rode away, disappearing into the distance. The girl let out a breath she didn't even realize she had been holding. She looked up at Keanu and Jason, her eyes wide with amazement. You okay? Jason asked. She nodded, still gripping her money tightly. Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. Good. And just like that, they turned and walked away, leaving her lemonade stand safe once more. As the bikers got on their motorcycles, they moved quickly, but their hands were shaking. The leader swung his leg over his bike and grabbed the handlebars tightly. He gave one last angry look at Keanu and Jason, his eyes full of hate. "This isn't over," he said in a low, serious voice. Keanu gave a small nod. "We'll be here." Jason smirked. "And next time bring more guys." The leader's face got even angrier, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he started his engine and the other bikers did the same. With a loud roar, they sped away, disappearing around the corner. The street became quiet again. The girl let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Keanu turned to her, his face softening. "Are you okay?" She nodded and finally relaxed her grip on the money she had been holding. Yeah, I think so." Jason leaned against the counter, looking at the broken lemonade stand. "Sorry about your stand." The girl quickly shook her head. "It's fine. I can rebuild it." Keanu smiled. "That's the right attitude." Jason clapped his hands together. "Well, that was a good warm-up." Keanu chuckled. "Yeah, now let's clean this up together." They all started fixing the stand. The air no longer felt heavy and tense like before. Instead, it felt lighter. The fight was over, but something in the back of their minds told them that trouble wasn't done yet. The girl's hand still shook a little as she picked up the cups scattered on the ground. Keanu and Jason helped, setting the wooden counter back up, picking up the overturned lemonade pitcher, and fixing the slightly bent sign. None of them spoke about what had just happened, but they all knew it wasn't over. Keanu glanced at the girl as she carefully stacked the plastic cups. "Are you sure you're okay?" She nodded, but her voice was still a little shaky. I thought they were going to take everything." Jason brushed dust off his hands and leaned against the stand. "Well, they didn't. And now they know better." Keanu nodded but kept looking down the street. Something in his gut told him this wasn't the end. Over the years, he had learned to trust his instincts. He had been in enough situations to know when someone wasn't ready to walk away from a fight. The way the leader had looked at them before leaving, it wasn't just anger. It was something more. Something dangerous. Jason noticed Keanu's serious expression. "You think they'll come back?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "Yeah." Jason smirked. "Good. I could use another workout." The girl looked worried. "They're going to try again, aren't they?" Keanu looked down at her, his voice steady. "Maybe. But if they do, we'll be here." She swallowed hard and nodded. Jason clapped his hands together. "All right, let's not waste time worrying about those guys. They're probably somewhere, licking their wounds and trying to decide if their pride is worth another beating." Keanu chuckled. "If they're smart, they'll let it go." The girl forced a small smile. "Thanks for helping me fix everything." Jason gave her a playful salute. "Anytime, kid." Keanu gave her a reassuring nod, but his eyes kept glancing toward the road. The sun was setting, making long shadows stretch across the pavement. They had done what they could for now, but deep down, Keanu knew this wasn't over yet. Then the quiet was broken. A deep, rumbling sound filled the air. Keanu and Jason turned their heads at the same time, their expressions hardening. The girl's face turned pale. "They're back." 6 motorcycles roared down the street, coming fast. This time they weren't just here to scare them. They were ready for a fight. Keanu took a deep breath, his body shifting into a fighting stance. Years of training for John Wick had made his reflexes sharp. He had practiced so much that fighting felt natural, like breathing. Jason rolled his shoulders, preparing for battle. He had spent years training for action movies, learning how to fight, how to take a hit, and most importantly, how to win. The girl took a step back, gripping the edge of her lemonade stand. "What do we do?" Keanu kept his eyes on the bikers. "Stay behind the stand. Don't move." Jason cracked his knuckles and smirked. "Let's finish this." The motorcycles screeched to a stop, their tires sliding against the pavement. The bikers jumped off, their movements quick and angry. The leader was first. His face was twisted in a furious snarl. His lip was swollen from their last fight. His knuckles were scraped and bruised. He was even angrier now, angrier and more reckless. "You think you can embarrass us and walk away?" Keanu tilted his head slightly, his face calm. "I don't think so." "I know." The leader clenched his fists. "Get them?" The fight began instantly. One biker swung a rusted chain at Jason's head. Jason ducked, grabbed the chain and yanked it hard. The biker lost his balance. Jason twisted the chain around the man's wrist and smashed an elbow into his face. The man staggered backward, dazed. Another biker rushed at Keanu, swinging wildly. But Keanu was too fast. He stepped aside, grabbed the man's arm, and flipped him onto the ground in one smooth motion. Before the man could move, Keanu struck his ribs with a quick, controlled hit, knocking the air out of him. The leader charged at Keanu, throwing a heavy punch. Keanu blocked it easily, stepping forward and twisting the man's arm into a lock. With a pained grunt, the leader was forced to his knees. Meanwhile, Jason moved through the bikers like a storm. One tried to tackle him, but Jason stood firm and lifted the man off the ground, flipping him over. Another biker swung a wooden bat. Jason caught it midair and drove his knee into the biker's stomach, sending him crashing to the ground. In just a few seconds, the fight was over. Keanu let go of the leader, stepping back. The man clutched his arm, wincing in pain. Jason nudged a biker's leg with his boot, making sure he stayed down. The remaining bikers groaned, barely able to lift themselves up. The leader spat on the pavement, breathing hard. His eyes still held anger, but now there was something else in them, fear. Keanu stood tall, his voice calm but final. "Walk away. For good this time." Jason crossed his arms. "Unless you want another beating." The leader hesitated. He looked at his beaten crew. His pride screamed at him to fight, but his body was in too much pain. He knew he couldn't win. With a sharp exhale, he pushed himself up. "Let's go." The other bikers didn't argue. One by one, they limped to their motorcycles. The engines roared to life. Before the leader climbed onto his bike, he turned to the girl. His face was tight with frustration. "This ain't over, kid." The girl, despite everything, stood tall. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. "Yeah, it is." Keanu smirked at her response. Jason chuckled. "She learns fast." The leader didn't reply. He revved his engine and sped off, his crew following close behind. As the sound of motorcycles faded, the tension finally broke. The girl let out a breath. "That was incredible." Keanu relaxed. "You did good, kid." Jason stretched his arms behind his head. "Well, that was fun." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Fun?" Jason grinned. "Yeah, a good workout." The girl smiled. "You guys are amazing." Keanu shrugged. "Just doing what's right." Jason moved his neck from side to side until it made a cracking sound. He looked around and took a deep breath. They had helped the girl fix her lemonade stand again. But this time the fight was over. The bikers were gone and she knew they wouldn't come back. No matter what happened next, she wasn't alone. The loud sound of motorcycles had finally disappeared. Now, the only sounds left were the soft rustling of leaves and the quiet noises of the neighborhood returning to normal. The girl still stood frozen behind her lemonade stand. She gripped the wooden counter tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping her from falling. Her chest moved up and down as she breathed fast and unevenly. But she didn't look scared anymore. Instead, there was something new in her eyes, something strong. Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham stood nearby. They were calm and steady, even though they had just been in a fight. Neither of them looked nervous. They had moved like trained fighters, strong and fast. It was clear they knew exactly what they were doing. Every punch, every kick, every block was perfect. Jason rolled his shoulders and wiped his hands on his shirt. "Well, that's over." Keanu let out a slow breath through his nose. His eyes stayed on the road, looking in the direction the bikers had gone. He wasn't so sure it was really over. Jason smirked. "What? You think they're dumb enough to come back?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He thought about the leader of the bikers. He remembered the way his jaw tightened before he left, the anger in his eyes. He had seen men like that before. Men who let their pride and hurt feelings push them into making bad decisions. "I don't think they're done," Keanu finally said. Jason let out a short laugh and shook his head. "Then they really don't learn." The girl looked at them both. Her voice was small but steady. "They can't come back, right?" Keanu looked at her, his face serious. "Not today." She swallowed hard and held onto the counter even tighter. She wasn't shaking anymore, but she could still feel the rush of energy in her body. Her heart was still beating fast. Jason sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, kid, we just beat them up twice in one day. If they're smart, they'll give up and go away." The girl hesitated, thinking about what he said. Did she believe him? She wasn't sure. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He placed it on the counter in front of her. "Use this to fix up your stand." The girl's eyes widened. She looked at the money, then back at Keanu. He gave her a small nod. "It's not a gift. Think of it like an investment in your business." Jason crossed his arms and grinned. "Yeah, and we expect a discount next time we stop by." The girl let out a soft laugh, finally relaxing a little. She looked down at the money, then backed up at them. Her eyes were different now. She wasn't just grateful. She respected them. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Keanu gave her a small smile. "Just keep doing what you're doing." Jason tapped the counter lightly. "And remember, when it's your turn to help someone, pay it forward. She nodded, her face determined. I will. Keanu glanced at the street again, checking for any signs of danger. Everything looked peaceful. A few neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. They had heard the fight but didn't want to get involved. That wasn't surprising. Most people didn't step in when trouble happened. Jason stretched and adjusted his stance. All right, we should get going before we end up in another round of this. Keanu smirked. Are you getting tired? Jason scoffed. Please. I could do this all day. The girl watched them as they turned to leave. Her hands gripped the counter again. Wait. They both stopped and looked back at her. She hesitated, then said, I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the money, but for standing up for me. Keanu gave her a small nod. It was the right thing to do. Jason winked. Besides, we couldn't let those guys ruin your business. You've got something big here. She smiled, feeling a little more confident. Next time you stop by, lemonade's on the house. Keanu chuckled. We'll hold you to that. Jason tilted his head toward the road. Come on, let's go. They turned and started jogging down the street, picking up their run from earlier. The girl watched them go, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. She had started this lemonade stand with a simple goal. But today has changed everything. She had faced real danger, but she hadn't run away. And she had found two unexpected friends who reminded her of something important. She wasn't just selling lemonade to save for college. She was building something bigger. And one day she would help others just like they had helped her. Keanu and Jason jogged side by side in silence. They were both thinking about the day's events. Jason exhaled through his nose. Do you ever think about how the smallest choices end up being the most important? Keanu smirked slightly. All the time. They kept running. The sun was still shining, but the shade from the trees made it cooler. Just as they were about to turn a corner, they heard a sound behind them. A deep, rumbling noise. Jason slowed down. You've got to be kidding me. Keanu stopped jogging and listened. The sound was coming from behind them. It was getting louder. Motorcycles. He and Jason exchanged a look. They didn't need to say anything. They both knew what this meant. Back at the lemonade stand, the girl had just finished stacking her cups when she heard it too. Her stomach twisted. She turned her head slowly, afraid of what she would see. The bikers were back. They rode down the street, their engines growling. The leader was in front, his jaw clenched, his eyes full of anger. The 5 others followed close behind. They stopped right in front of the lemonade stand. The leader shut off his engine and swung one leg off his bike. The others did the same, stepping forward together. They were trying to scare her. The girl's hands started to shake, but she quickly clenched them into fists. She wasn't going to let them see her fear. Not this time. The bald leader took a step closer, his boots crunching on the pavement. His smirk was gone. His voice was low and dangerous. You think that was funny? The girl didn't answer. One of the bikers, the one missing a tooth, snorted. A couple of actors rough us up and now you think you're safe? The leader glanced at the money still sitting on the counter. His lips curled into a sneer. We're not leaving without it this time. The girl swallowed hard but didn't move. It's my money. The leader tilted his head. That's the thing, kid. You don't get to decide that. Before he could take another step, a shadow fell over the stand. A large, strong hand landed on the leader's shoulder. You don't get to decide that either, said a deep, familiar voice. The leader stiffened. Slowly he turned his head. His face twisted with anger. Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham stood beside him. They didn't look scared. They looked ready. Keanu turned to face the bad guys completely. He held his hands steady and looked at them without fear. You just don't know when to stop, do you? He said. The leader of the bad guys smirked. We could say the same about you, he said. The leader glanced at the little girl standing behind the lemonade stand. Her small hands gripped the counter tightly, and her knuckles were white. She was scared, but she didn't move. Behind the counter, the money she had earned was still there, untouched, but the bad guys hadn't forgotten about it. The leader sneered. This isn't about you two, he said, pointing his chin at Keanu and Jason. This is between me and the kid. Jason crossed his arms and scoffed. That's funny, he said. Because I thought real men don't steal money from little girls. The leader's face darkened, but Jason kept talking. Oh, and I see you brought your gang again, Jason said, stepping forward a little. Do you think that's going to change anything? The biker standing behind the leader looked angry, but Keanu stayed still. He didn't need to move. His voice was calm and steady. Walk away. The leader laughed and shook his head. No, he said. Not this time. Then he turned to his men and gave a short nod. Get them. The bikers rushed forward. The first one ran at Jason, swinging a heavy wrench. Jason quickly stepped to the side, grabbed the biker's wrist and twisted it hard. The biker grunted in pain and the wrench fell to the ground with a loud clunk. Before the man could react, Jason drove his knee into the biker's stomach. The man gasped for air and stumbled backward, holding his belly. At the same time, another biker swung a metal chain at Keanu. The chain whistled through the air, but Keanu ducked low and moved fast. He grabbed the biker's arm and pulled him forward. In one quick motion, Keanu twisted the man's wrist, making him drop the chain. Then Keanu pushed him back with a strong strike to the chest. The biker staggered and fell. A third biker tried to tackle Keanu from the side. But Keanu was too quick. He stepped aside and the biker ended up running straight into the lemonade stand. Cups and lemonade flew everywhere. Jason was still fighting too. A tall, skinny biker threw a punch at him, but Jason caught his arm, twisted it behind his back and slammed his face into the counter. The biker groaned. Jason yanked him back and threw him onto the ground. The leader saw his men losing. His face twisted in anger. Growling, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. The sharp blade gleamed under the sun. He gripped it tightly, his knuckles turning white. Keanu's eyes flicked to the knife. He knew what to do. He had trained for moments like this while working on his John Wick movies. He had practiced disarming opponents over and over again. His movements were perfect. The leader lunged at Keanu with the knife, but Keanu moved fast. He dodged, grabbed the leader's wrist, and twisted it just enough to make him loosen his grip. The knife dropped to the ground with a clatter. Before the leader could fight back, Keanu struck his elbow, forcing his fingers to open completely. Then, in one swift motion, he spun the leader around and locked his arm behind his back. The leader struggled, but Keanu held him tight. Meanwhile, Jason handled the last biker. The man swung wildly, but Jason ducked and then hit him hard in the ribs. The biker doubled over, gasping for air. Jason grabbed his jacket, yanked him down, and drove his knee into the man's stomach. The biker groaned and collapsed onto the ground. Silence filled the air. The only sounds were the bikers groaning in pain. Keanu let go of the leader and gave him a small push. The man stumbled forward but stayed on his feet. His hands clenched into fists, his face red with anger. Jason cracked his neck and smirked. "Are you done yet?" he asked. The leader didn't answer. His pride was broken. He looked around at his gang, but they were too hurt and tired to fight anymore. Keanu crossed his arms. "This is over." The leader gritted his teeth, but he knew Keanu was right. He had lost again. With a final frustrated growl, he turned to his gang. "Get on your bikes," he ordered. One by one, the bikers struggled to their feet and limped to their motorcycles. The engines roared as they climbed onto their seats, their faces twisted with pain. Before the leader got on his bike, he turned to Keanu and Jason. His eyes were filled with anger but also something else to defeat. "This isn't over," he muttered. The little girl, who had been watching everything, stepped forward. Her voice was strong. "Yeah, it is," Jason chuckled. "She learns fast." Keanu nodded. The leader didn't say another word. He revved his engine, then sped down the street, his gang following closely behind. As the last bike disappeared, the air felt calm again. The little girl let out a deep breath. She loosened her grip on the counter, finally relaxing. Keanu turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I think so." Jason looked at the lemonade stand and sighed. "Well, that took a beating." The girl looked at the mess, then lifted her chin. "I can fix it." Keanu smiled. "Good." Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He placed it on the counter. "Use this to fix it up." She hesitated. "But you already helped me so much." Keanu shook his head. "Think of it as a business investment." Jason grinned. "And remember, when it's your turn, pay it forward." She nodded firmly. "I will." Keanu glanced down the street, making sure the bikers were really gone. The neighborhood was quiet again, like nothing had happened. A few people peeked out from their windows, whispering, but no one had dared to come outside. Jason stretched. "All right, we should get going." Keanu nodded. But before they left, he looked back at the girl. "You're stronger than you think." She smiled. The fear she had felt earlier was gone. Now she felt brave. Jason gave her a small salute. "See you around, kid." Then they turned and jogged down the street. The girl watched them go, gripping the money tightly in her hand. She had started the day thinking she was just selling lemonade. But now she knew better. This wasn't just about making money, it was about standing up for herself. And thanks to Keanu and Jason, she knew she could. The sun started to set, casting long shadows across the quiet street. The girl stood behind what was left of her lemonade stand. The chaos was over, but the memory of what happened remained. But she didn't feel defeated. She felt strong. She tucked the money safely under the counter and thought about what she would do next. She could fix her stand. She would fix it. And this time she would make it even better, even stronger, just like she had become today. Across the street, a few neighbors still whispered, pointing at her and at the two figures jogging away in the distance. Keanu and Jason ran at a steady pace. They didn't need to say much. The fight was over. The girl was safe. That was all that mattered. After a while, Jason spoke. Think they'll come back? Keanu thought for a moment. Then he exhaled and said, maybe. Jason nodded. But she's not the same scared kid they met earlier. A small smile crossed Keanu's face. No, she's not. They ran in silence for a bit before Jason laughed. I still can't believe we stopped for lemonade and ended up in a fight. Keanu chuckled. Yeah. Next time, maybe we should just buy a bottle of water and keep moving. Jason shook his head. Nah, I'd do it again. Keanu glanced at him. Yeah, me too. Back at the lemonade stand, the girl took a deep breath. Then she started picking up the cups. It would take time, but she wasn't giving up. She had come too far to let a few broken boards stop her now. If you enjoy the story, drop a comment and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe for more adventures. Your support keeps the stories coming. See you in the next video.